Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming back today and joining us for a very interesting and important discussion on captivity, the past, the future, and the present of it, and options that you may have to make small changes that could lead to big changes in the end. So today we are going to talk about hologram zoos. That's right, hologram zoos. I know it sounds pretty amazing, and could a hologram revolution be on the way? And could that hologram revolution potentially stop actual zoos from being needed and being there? So it's a very complicated question. And today I'm very excited to announce we have a couple amazing guests that I'd like to bring on right now. Let's get everybody here. Here we go. So a lot of you that are joining us, my name is Eric. I am the host. And with us today, we have Mr. Jeff Kremer, animal rights advocate, or animal welfare advocate as well. And you recognize him from the movie The Conservation Game. And we also have Nicole Slater, who worked with us on Harambe, who had a very special relationship with Harambe, who also has had pro-zoo and questions about the zoo experiences and moments, and we want to hear from her as well. And we also have our good friend Konrad over there, and his voice is it's not quite popping on there. Konrad, if you can, for now, maybe try to go online and see if you can go to our live stream and add some stuff in the comments, because we really want to have your voice here. Now, before we begin talking about the topic, I do want to bring out, we have a variety of perspectives here today, so we want to get everybody's perspective. And please join us in the comments. Please be respectful. Everyone has a different view on this, and the only way that we can find a future is if we start talking about solutions together. And we all have to be part of the conversation for it to work. So we just wanted to invite everybody to jump on in. Hey, there he is. Hey, Konrad. Okay, so he's there. We're going to be bringing Konrad's voice on through this. So to begin with, I would like to talk about these recent hologram zoos. And now Zoocade is the one that that was brought up to us by our friend Nicole. And I wanted to also just bring the page up here. So this is a hologram zoo that brings children close, and I wanted to just put it up there. So to begin with, I would like to start with you, Jeff, and hear everybody's take on what do you think of these hologram zoos?
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. It's I read, I followed the evolution of the first hologram zoo in Texas there that you mentioned, and she said the founder was inspired by seeing it over in, I believe, Australia. I think it's a great part of the evolutions that's necessary within, we call it captive conservation. It makes a perfect step. Back at the Big Cat Sanctuary I worked, GFAS accredited sanctuary I worked for in Tampa, they actually started, back in 2019 with augmented reality. And it was a perfect timing. The malls were losing business. So the founder of the sanctuary negotiated with a couple of local big malls for empty store space and created the first 2 augmented reality zoos in the country. And so this is a natural progression of going from augmented reality to virtual reality to holograms. I think it's a huge opportunity to make a positive difference with animal welfare and also in education. I think it's to be candid, I think it's a missed opportunity so far for AZA, ZA accredited zoos. I think, it's not being looked at as closely and thoroughly and not being supported. So I'm eager to see somebody jump on the bandwagon within those institutions.
Wonderful. And okay, I would also like to Nicole, what are your first impressions of this?
I love it. I think it's a good way for you to get that interaction with animals without, transmitting diseases, without them being captive environment. And it's a cool new way to learn and educate our kids properly.
And I see a note here. Konrad says, one large thing that I wish for all of us to discuss would be to address that captive populations and wild populations are separate. And that is a great point. We need to acknowledge that zoo populations of wildlife are in captivity, and it is very difficult to change that. And I believe, Konrad, tell me if I'm correct, but you're also talking about the fact that the animals we have in care right now can't be easily reintroduced, as the perspective is. It is very difficult to say shut down the zoos in general, because my thing is, where will the animals go? That is undoubtedly their homes, despise any feelings of whether or not they should be. Okay, so I think that's a very interesting perspective to bring up. So to start with, okay, so let's say the hologram zoos do take over. And I want to kind of come back to the education aspect, Jeff, you were just mentioning, and Nicole and Konrad as well. But to just jump right in and address Konrad's concerns, when we talk about zoos, one of their pillars is that we help with conservation and education. Now, if these hologram zoos were to shut down regular zoos, what do you guys think would happen then? What would be a solution for the captive populations?
Yeah, so Konrad brings up a great perspective, and like you said, Eric, it's such a complex issue. First of all, in my personal and professional opinion, zoos aren't going to go anywhere in our lifetime. It's just simply, they're the 800-pound gorilla. It's too big an industry. It's not going to go out of business. And I think what I'd like to see in the evolution, like you and I discussed before, is that if zoos are building their brand on contributing to education and conservation, then what they need to do is actively contribute significantly to actual conservation initiatives in the wild. And they're just simply not doing that. As we've discussed before, the general estimate that I see is that zoos, accredited zoos, AZA, ZAA, that of their gross revenue, they're only contributing collectively probably 2 to 5% of their gross revenue toward actual conservation initiatives. Their business, their brand is captive conservation. So I think a nice evolution to get to where we want to see for animals in our lifetime or after is to see that combination of the hologram zoos. At the same time, it's going to be necessary for real zoos, accredited zoos, to contribute more significantly to legitimate conservation programs in the wild. I think it's that evolution collectively that's going to get us to where we want to go see that needle move forward. Zoos aren't, there is absolutely no way zoos are going to go out of existence in our life based on holograms or any other factor. They're simply not going to go out of business. It's not even conceivable. So what we want to do as a collective society is, from all sides, approach it, okay, so how can we make a positive difference with the animals that are being held in zoos? How can we all contribute to the animals in the wild and where we want to see them live naturally? And it's that collective effort that I think will get there. But I think hologram zoos and virtual zoos are just part of that movement to work toward that, end game, that end goal, which is going to be far past my lifetime.
And what are your thoughts, Nicole? Do you think that we will see zoos fade, or how do you think maybe their roles can change in the future?
So zoos, unfortunately, like we've said, is the animals are living there, so obviously they can't just go away overnight. But my hope in my lifetime is to see the efforts for changing that, because in my opinion, if we end the breeding, then at some point there won't be animals living in captivity. And if we end the breeding, then there would be a day where it could just be, the wild animals and the holograms, and then us learning just through that. But I don't think that animals in captivity are doing any good.
Okay, so this brings up an interesting perspective, which we bring it back to what Jeff brought up: education. And for now, I said Konrad made a good point. We should separate. So for now, we'll just talk about captive animals. And as I understand it, captive animals are bred by the zoos. They breed especially endangered animals. A lot of zoos will be specialized and breed, say, a gorilla. Some maybe say like zebras or elephants. I know there's elephant babies popping out, hippos, things like that. And then they will trade them to other zoos to sell tickets. Now, a lot of people would say, well, that's the educational component. is when you take your kid to the zoo, they're going to learn about animals, and they're going to see and learn about animals. And the most important thing, and I think we would all agree, most important thing is that we make sure we give a space to create empathy for the animals in all the children that are growing up, because they're the generation that's going to determine how animals are treated. So when we come back to breeding, so breeding is for the effort, or is justified through the concept of education. Now, my question to the panel, and I really want to know what you guys think, is education, say, I want to share this one, for example, is education more intimate if you can be this close to an animal, even if it's not real, versus being 60 or 100 feet away looking at an exhibit of an animal that you can't maybe look into their eyes? So I'd love to know what everybody thinks about that.
Well, I'll give you my perspective. I'm 64 years old, and I grew up, seeing animals in zoos, but I never got close enough where I needed to touch any of them. And I am who I am today as an animal advocate. I think Nicole brought up the cornerstone, which is the problem, which is the breeding. And Eric, you were referencing, they breed for education. They also use that, guys, as it's for conservation. But realize that in accredited zoos, probably only 5% of the animals that they're breeding are actually endangered animals. The rest are just bred to attract visitors to the zoo. So there's only about 5% of the population of species in a zoo that are actually endangered. So the breeding doesn't need to take place, like Nicole said. We want to stop the breeding. So part of the evolution toward that is the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries. So where some of these animals can go, if we develop more sanctuaries that were nonprofit, if zoos need a place to, if they stop breeding and need a place to place animals, you've got the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries. It was established in 2007, currently have approximately 190 members in facilities, probably, I think it was 18 or 20 countries around the world. If sanctuaries evolve and zoos start to minimize, there's that place to place animals if they need them. And the four cornerstones of an accredited sanctuary, there's a lot of places that'll say they're a sanctuary, a preserve, or a foundation, but an accredited sanctuary has four cornerstones. You don't breed, you don't buy, you don't sell, and you don't allow public contact between the animals entrusted to your care, any species, with the public. So I think the sanctuary, that accredited sanctuary, is a natural part of the solution to what we're all wanting to evolve towards.
Yeah, and it does sound like an amazing, to give people an opportunity to see the animals in a more natural setting. And I was, and Nicole, I was going to ask you about that, because you have been to the zoo and you've also been into Africa helping animals. Tell us about that, and tell us about education.
I would like to start off by saying the zoo's breeding endangered animals is keeping them alive in captivity. But what is the purpose of the species being alive in captivity if they're not in the wild doing their ecological role in the ecosystem? So I think it's crazy to just keep an animal alive just to have it to view and not do anything about the endangered species populating in the wild, in my opinion. But also, I have going to a zoo and going to a sanctuary in Africa, an accredited sanctuary in Africa, was a completely different experience. I mean, these lions had trees to climb on, they had land to roam, they were, they laid around some of the day, but they were also playing and running around a lot of the day as well. Whereas in the zoo, I feel like you just see them laying there because there's not much roaming they can do. And his name was Albert, but he had this wonderful design plan for them where he made their enclosure a huge circle. So it wasn't like it was a square so they could get cornered. It was a circle so they could just keep going and run and go. And it wasn't like they were trapped in a corner. It was a circle. So it's kind of like it's infinite, which I thought was genius.
I love that. And I know that they use that design as well for evil. They use it in slaughterhouses because there is a nice psychology that animals will have if they have this ability to go around the corner and don't usually fear, for some reason, that type of movement. So that's really cool. And I know you want to work with wildlife as opposed to, say, in a zoological setting. What are the challenges you find? I mean, zoos offer an immediate interaction in a positive way. And the thing is, we have to remember that everybody who goes to the zoo wants to do something really good for the animals and for their children. So, anybody that's here with us and talking, like, we're not, we understand. And until recently, zoos were always seen as the best option in the world. But I'm curious, Nicole, like, you're of a new generation. How do you see that?
Yeah, so doing school the route of zoology, it would have been easier to get a job, as you were saying, get right in there. It is difficult finding a spot, for me not doing that route. But I think it's important that I just don't see captivity being a good long term for the animals or at all. So I think it's important we teach our children that what we did 100 years ago, bringing them into captivity, was wrong. And now we're in this now because we have to be. And in 100 years, if we end the breeding, if we do the things that we need to do to eventually get captivity out of the picture, is what I think should be done.
It's interesting you said that, because it changes what zoos have to do, which is try to get everybody to ignore the cruelty.
Mm-hmm.
And if we were able to make a nice change with them, maybe it would be a great learning moment, teaching moment, where we can say, we had this wrong. Mm-hmm. And now we understand animals. Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah, so Nicole hits it right in the head. I mean, I'm of a different generation, but it completely aligned with her philosophy, is that captive conservation is not the answer. I mean, it isn't. Zoos are there for one reason, to breed animals so that your future kids and grandkids and great-grandkids and every grandkid in the future can go see an animal in captivity. That's not the solution, right? So the solution is preserving habitat and helping sustain these species in their native environments. So going back to the hologram zoos, I think, again, if zoos are going to altruistically want to be part of the solution, then instead of like all these zoos that are building, $10 or $20 million additions, or putting in a water park, or putting in, some of them have golf courses and roller coasters. Well, don't do that. Build a holographic exhibit that's going to do exactly what those attractions are meant to do, which is to bring guests to the zoo, and then use that holographic exhibit to educate the public about the plight of these species in the wild, and try to engage them in being part of the solution. It's just this concept of captive conservation is simply never was and never will be the answer.
Okay, Konrad, I think we can hear you this time.
Yeah, can you hear me? I'm on my phone now.
Yes, fantastic. Okay. Thank you for joining.
I did migrate over to my cell phone.
Please jump in. I know you probably have quite a bit to add.
Well, I did actually just have to get off of the app on my laptop to go migrate to my phone. So I did not hear a good chunk of what was just said. So let me
jump back in. Yeah, no worries. So, okay, what we really would like to know, I'd like to know what your perspective is. We've been talking about what are the zoo's potential roles in the future. Sierra and I, when we were in England, we found a zoo and we were going to go visit it, and it was all local animals. And I thought, we were like, this is great. And Sierra always says it would be fantastic if we could also, instead of educating, say, about zebras, we also educate people about their local wildlife, because I realize I know more about a hippopotamus than I do my local squirrels. And, I feel like maybe there's a way that the zoos can change in a sense, from having to justify what people perceive as incorrect cruelty to maybe being a great learning lesson, and saying, we're here to save the animals and protect them, which I think is kind of always been zoos' intentions, at least the zookeepers' intentions. So Konrad, how do you sort of see with these hologram ideas coming in, do you think there is still a place for education in traditional zoos? And what would you say that you think the zoo model right now, or say the captivity model works? In what ways, if you could give us your perspectives on that?
So right now, the way that I see it is that, so having worked with many establishments, separate establishments, such as Critchlow Alligator Sanctuary, my friend Brendan Finnerty, he did have a zoo open at one point. I'm not sure if he still has it open today. It was very interesting to see the families and the children interacting with the animals. At Critchlow Alligator Sanctuary, they do not do any breeding or any, captive. There's no trade or anything like that going on. They collaborate, with law enforcement, and they have animals surrendered to them. They are strictly a sanctuary. They are great at what they do. I love the Critchlow family. They've been operating for, I think, 30 years now. What they allow the public to do is they have, twice a year, we allow them to help us move the animals from their winter habitats back outside to the enclosures outside for the summer, and they've introduced this whole process where they actually are able to allow these animals to thrive and survive in, the harsh climate of Michigan, which is very interesting. But since these animals were introduced in the pet trade and they were, neglected and abused, to a point where this is a service that is absolutely necessary in the state. That you used to be able to find alligators for as low as $1 in the state of New York, and back in like the 50s. So the trade, it got pretty greedy, and then these animals, unfortunately, there was an injustice going on, and now the Critchlows, they stepped in and they provide a service that is very, it's needed. It's something that is really needed. And seeing the way that the public has stepped in and helped them out, and just even children, just seeing the joy in their eyes and just being able to interact and help move the animals, just move them. They're not. They also do have a program where they have veterinary students come in, and that they help with if there's any sick animals or anything like that. The zoo, now when you talk about, so that's the sanctuary standpoint, like it's very cool how they do that. Okay, but like zoos, traditionally I see vet students come in, getting a hands-on experience in a professional manner, where it's like you're working with the animal one-on-one, not like being hoarded by a crowd of people. Okay, I could see it. It's necessary. You need to help these animals thrive and survive where they are. It's so hard, because when you guys talk about, you're looking at the animal from behind the glass, like as if you're gawking at them, or I don't really want to say that that's just stressing the animal out, just in the aspect that they're being watched. You know what I mean? Like it's hard. Like it's not like the people that are viewing them are like poking them with sticks, or like, it's not like that. At least I would hope it's not like that. You know what I mean? I don't know. When it comes to captivity, the animals are where they are. It's in order to reintroduce a captive gorilla into a space of, the Congo, you would have to take into account that, there's war going on there. There's these animals are threatened where they are right now. You know what I mean? So it's like, you can't just, it's hard. It's a very hard topic.
Jeff, sorry, I think, did I see you wanted to jump in there?
Yeah, there we go. No, I mean, Konrad brings up great points. They are where they are, as Nicole has said earlier. They are where these animals are where they are because humans are breeding them purposely, right, for captivity. 99.9% of the animals and species that are bred and born in zoos, there is never any intent to release them into the wild, period. So that it's just this falsehood of captive conservation. And with regard to stress, no, I agree. A good accredited zoos, I won't say that that's the most stressful thing, when a visitor is watching the animal from afar over a moat, but I will say that that's the public side of the view. So what happens, having worked at an AZA accredited zoo, what happens is after hours, the majority of animals get shifted into night houses. They get shifted out of their enclosures, their public enclosures that are all faux waterfalls and faux rocks, and they get shifted into basically a concrete and steel jail cell.
Yeah.
And that's where they spend the night. And it's practical, right? So the zoo has to clean that outdoor yard, and the only way they can do that is to lock the animal up. And so that's a cycle that takes place. Having worked at the AZA accredited zoo, it's a cycle that takes place 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And so that I would suggest that animals, these sentient beings, being locked in concrete and steel jail cells, and I'm well familiar with they call them night houses, that's not something that's just unnatural, and it's got to produce stress for any of these wild captive animals. So I don't believe, again, going back to captive conservation is unnatural. It's being perpetuated by humans for the primary purpose of profit for humans. So yes, they promote education and conservation, but that's a very small part of the captive conservation business. And we need to, again, they're not going away. So we want to be part of a positive solution. And going back to the virtual zoos, the holographic zoos, that's part of helping to move the needle forward. And zoos, ethically and morally should be required to be part of that solution. And I think they're missing the bandwagon if they're not jumping on board. And again, don't build a roller coaster, build a holographic exhibit. You'll get people coming in, they'll spend the same money on drinks and admission and plushies, but at the same time, you can educate them about the plight of these species that should be in the wild.
Eric, you're muted.
There we go. I like the point that Konrad had brought up that, the wild where they're supposed to live is being destroyed in a lot of ways. And it would be nice for us to make that connection. I find that in the zoo experience that we encountered, there's not a lot of care for what are we going to do about these gorillas out in the wild, and what can we do as opposed to the breeding program. So I do think that, the educational aspect is so important. I mean, for me, growing up, going to the zoo, seeing Shamu at SeaWorld, all that kind of stuff as a kid, and then going on an elephant rescue or having to get out of the way because an elephant, you don't know if they're charging towards you or just walking to something behind you. And it's really it's so different. So I love your idea, Jeff, of let's start making more hybrids now where we can take people into their realm. And maybe that is a way that we can take what we have now and help educate people about the importance of the nature that we need to move all these animals out from the one side of the wall to the other.
Well, and think about it, in today's society, right? Like not when I was growing up, today's society, the kids are digitally, they're living their lives virtually, practically. So imagine the opportunity we have to connect with the next generations. Nicole is one step toward that. And then think about the younger generations, that it could be further connected, and they don't need to go to a zoo and see a gorilla out in an island, 30 yards away. They can connect through virtual reality or holograms and get just as excited because they're all tech-based today, right? So let's utilize that. Let's leverage that.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I know, our kids are more interested in seeing something on the TV at the moment, than wanting to go out into nature. And Konrad, go ahead. I see you want to jump in there.
So one big thing that I want to say back when you were talking about the night houses. So one interesting example to look at, I don't know if you guys know about the history of the Belle Isle Zoo. Now, this was a zoo that was opened within Detroit city limits before the Detroit Zoo was open. I talk a lot about the history of it in my book, Rule of the Wild. It is a fiction piece, fictional literary piece, but I used a lot of real world history in there to shed light on the history of the city. Now, when I was researching for my book, I came across the history of the Belle Isle Zoo. You guys can go on YouTube. You could check out. There have been people that actually have, I don't know how much I can say about it, but a few of my friends have done it too. They've gone into the abandoned zoo, and you could find videos of complete walkthroughs of the facilities that were open at one point, and you see how small these spaces are, these cages, these night houses, as you say. That it's horrendous. It's absolutely tragic to look at. I could see why this establishment was shut down. I encourage you guys to go on YouTube and find these walkthrough videos, because it is absolutely horrible to look at, and it's a perfect example of what you guys do. You guys are, I myself am against. I get it. I understand it. It's to say, that every zoo operates that way. I would really hope that they don't. I've seen facilities where they do not do that at all. And they, have a relationship with the animals that they house to a point where they can actually just walk right with the animal and clean up with the animal right there watching them. A good example of that is the Creature Conservancy in Ann Arbor. I don't know if you guys have ever been there. It's a phenomenal facility. It's like family. When you go in there, you're like seeing all these animals interact, and they're just, it's a beautiful thing to see. And that's it's two sides of the same coin. So I just had to add that in there. Just throw that in there.
Interesting. And I think, it is, you make a great point that there are places that have good facility practices. And I think, Jeff, you were just talking about some of the tips, and it's really important that our viewers know this, tips to know that you're in a good sanctuary, that you're supporting something that is going to be good for the animals. And I know you had mentioned them earlier. If you don't mind to just recap those as well, since we're right on the topic.
I think Konrad brings up a good point. You don't know what you don't know, myself included. So I didn't know what it was like. We thought when we went to work for our local AZA accredited zoo years ago that it was going to be our lifetime job, and it was a dream come true. And it took 4 years of learning the business side of zoos. There's the operation side, which is all about profit and dollar, and there's the animal side. And those animal caretakers are all like all of us here that are on this virtual meeting today, right? They would give their lives for these animals. But we encourage, whether it's a sanctuary, a zoo, any facility that's holding captive animals, take a behind the scenes tour, empower yourselves with knowledge. And then, as I like to say, people don't make a right or a wrong decision. You make the best decision. You make the best decision based on information or in life experience. So if you haven't been to a facility and you're wondering about it, go to that facility, and almost all of them offer behind the scenes tours. And you then will be empowered with the information that will enable you to say, okay, well, yeah, I'm comfortable with the way they're treating their animals, or no, I'm not. So I think knowledge is empowering, and let's use life experience, go visit places, ask questions, and we all move the needle forward.
I wanted to say we have some friends on here today. We have our good friend Emery, and as well as our good friend Estemic. Now, these guys are out in the field. These guys are in Africa. These guys are showing people nature. So these guys are absolutely amazing. They're both great guys. We've all known
with what happened in Goma recently, survivors. I love you, Estemic. I am so happy that you are here.
Yes, Estemic survived the recent takeover in Goma and has been through an incredible trauma and is working to just get back out there in the field, because he just wants everybody to understand how beautiful Africa is and how incredible it is. And we were just had the opportunity to be in Africa recently, and if you're going to go there, you can't do it without a guide. Go get yourself a guide. Talk to Emery, talk to Estemic, reach out to us, reach out to Konrad, to Nicole, to us, and ask us, and we will point you in the right direction to get a good guide that will take you to the wildlife. And the reason I bring up Africa is because they have an entirely different model. They have a different model, and it's summed up in this one picture that we end up taking. We're in Africa, and the deal there is the guides will take you, and the animals do what the animals do, and everybody watches. And no matter what the animal is, they're in charge, you're visiting. And you're on their turf, and you don't get near them. A lot of times you're not allowed to get out of your Land Cruiser because it's too dangerous. They'll attack because it's nature. Now, that's us going and saying, here's animals. They run the show, and we're just going to find good observation points. Then you go to a place like Thailand, where most elephants are bred or captured. Their spirits are broken, and they're sent into captivity, zoos, etc., for worldwide consumption. And they have beautiful sanctuaries. So we went to visit a woman in a sanctuary, and these elephants love her so much she has to hop on a bicycle and try to escape. She has to bicycle as fast as she can, and the elephants all chase her. Lexia at Elephant Nature Park, absolutely amazing. And we showed a picture to our friends in Africa, and they said, "Why is this elephant chasing this woman?" They were so worried for her because elephants and people should never be near each other. And I thought it was interesting that the Africans were worried that the elephant was going to chase her. But in Thailand, it was cute that, they love her so much that she had to run. So it's an interesting, fascinating, different relationship. And there it is right there. Yeah, we showed this picture, and the guy said, "Oh no, did she make it? Is she okay? Why is they chasing her?" And they're not. She's their mom. So thank you for Sierra for getting that up. And everybody, I want to mention Sierra Williams back here doing all of our producing and making sure our show runs smooth, because I love these conversations. So Africa has one model, and the rest of the world is kind of glomming on this old European model. So there is a way that we can reconceptualize captivity. So as kind of a final round, I'd love to ask everybody, point by point, first of all, if there's anything that we didn't talk about that you want to mention, but most importantly, how do you see the future of captivity, zoos especially? We'll start with you, Jeff.
Well, I mean, the positive is that, when I was born in 1960, so where zoos were and where they've come to today is tremendously different, and that's a tremendous positive, right? So we just I would encourage, what we need is more connectivity. We need to have, the only way we lose this battle is through apathy. So we need to find new ways to connect, and thanks for putting this together today, because hologram zoos are one of the pieces of the puzzle to help put together a solution. And again, going back, I'm totally aligned with Nicole, which is that we don't, the end game, the end goal is, I'd like not to see animals held in captivity. I don't believe in captive conservation. And that's after having grown up with it, having worked in it, having volunteered in it, having been to Africa. And, when I first saw at the Crocodile River in South Africa and seeing the elephants come over, from Kruger National down to the river to drink, and having worked at a facility that worked with other AZA accredited zoos to rob elephants from Swaziland and abduct them and bring them to the United States to put them in zoo for the rest of their lives, for me, I mean, it brought me to tears, right? It was a profound moment in my life that just further planted that seed that we have to change. We have to disrupt the concept of captive conservation. So I see us as being part of that solution. We just need to further engage the public, and I think we do that obviously through education, and we can do that through virtual reality, holograms, any way we can educate the public about that. But what we can't ignore is the fact that the accredited zoos, AZA, ZAA, and even privately owned, they need to be part of the solution as well, right? That's their responsibility. That's their business. That's their mission vision. And we as the public need to hold them accountable for that.
Beautifully said.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
So back in, I think this was 3 years ago now. I don't know if you guys heard about the Malayan tiger echoed the tiger in the Naples Zoo.
Yes.
Yes.
That's my blog open. I did do a piece on that where I was doing an investigative study about how the echo tiger, they came to the conclusion that they had to put the animal down. Unfortunately, the officer who ended up doing that, he was heard over comms asking for a tranquilizer. But the issue was that I'm not sure if the funding was not there for the zoo, that they just didn't have it available, or if there, there was nobody that was employed at the zoo that was actually there at the time when the tiger got out. That still, to me, is very unclear. But what I saw happen that the zoo did after was that they set a fund to help the Malayan tigers in the wild. Now, when I heard that, I looked up where that funding went, and I'm not, making any claims here or anything like that, but I'm not sure where, any of that, what they raised, what it went towards. I'm not sure. But it led me to find an organization actually in the Malaysian wilderness called MyCat, where they actually do work with these animals in the wild, and they do actually help the conservation of these animals. So I decided to raise awareness to that organization instead. So I do see your standpoint here with the zoos and everything like that. Having said that, so.
Yeah, let's not forget that the reason why he ended up having to be killed was because he was put there behind bars, and then the barriers weren't safe for him in the end. Because again, it goes back to humans not following the rules and safety guidelines for the tiger, and the barrier that was put for the safety of us. We, raced across it, and now it's the animals whose
it's a failed concept. And we had at the AZ accredited zoo in Tampa, they had an incident where one of the Sumatran tigers, Inshallah, a female named Inshallah, got out while the zoo was open. And the only person on duty in the Asia domain, which is where the Sumatran tigers were kept, was a brand new zookeeper, had like 4 months of experience, come from a bat conservatory. So the zoo put an inexperienced keeper in charge of locking down an entire section of the zoo. And when that tiger got out, they called the code 1. They locked, got all the people to safety. And so back to Konrad's point, the tranquilizer is not going to be an effective means. And it wasn't with Inshallah as well. It's going to take a period of time before that tranquilizer, if you can dart it and get it to stick, is going to take effect, 10, 15, 20 minutes. In the meantime, if that tiger's got a hold of somebody's arm, they're not going to tranquilize it. So it's just a failed concept, and we need to be continue to be the voice for change.
The big thing, the reason why I brought it up was that the officer that was on call and that responded to that, he, when you listen, if you could still find it online, they did actually put the radio recording and everything on there. It just to listen to his voice, and like he was, still, he was struggling with this animal, yes, but he still saw that this was a live animal, like this was a living sentient being that he did not want to kill. He didn't want to do that. That just to hear that raw, like I was like, wow, that's, this brings you back to Harambe. Like there were many people that were on call that didn't even want to, pull the trigger there either. You know what I mean? So it's like, I just.
Yeah, and Nicole keeps summing it up. It's like all these tragedies are the result of
humans,
right? Human error, but the humans have put these animals that don't belong behind cages. They put them in captivity. It's all for human benefit. And so just Google zoo escape. It happened, last week, where a giraffe got out from one of the AZA accredited zoos, and you'll see the same verbiage used over and over. It briefly, and the public was never in danger. And, they use the same verbiage over and over. But while my tenure at the AZA accredited zoo, and I'm confident that it happens consistently across zoos across country, is it happens on a regular basis. At our zoo, we would have an escape of an animal, and it wasn't always going to be the Sumatran tiger, but you have 2,000 animals. It's just the law of averages. They're going to get out, and in our zoo, it happened on the average of once or twice a month.
I would never guess it's that frequent. They make it seem like it's a very rare thing, and that does bring back into question too. should, say, endangered animals be in the human blender? Because if you've got, 300, can we afford to have one shot? Say, like, like we bring up Echo, Harambe, a lot of the animals. It's challenging because, like you had mentioned, Konrad, there's the population of the wild, gorillas, say, and then the natural gorillas, the mountain, the ones that grew up in nature. And to the credit of zoos, they were forced to stop in 1973 from the Endangered Species Act, where they could no longer just go snag these animals and pull them out. There are exceptions for elephants in certain countries, and this is a big problem. And it comes back to our beloved Cincinnati Zoo that was unfortunately had to shoot Harambe. We still feel for everybody that was involved in that. And as a matter of fact, we've become friends with one of the police officers that responded to the incident, and the profound impact it had on everybody that day makes us question, if that's the only solution, should it even be allowed? And I'm just curious what you guys think. Maybe there's some policy changes where we can start by getting maybe endangered animals out or dangerous animals. But Konrad, I'm curious what your thoughts, if, like, let's just say that I started a campaign tomorrow and said, let's get all the tigers out of zoos. What would be your feeling on that, or your response on that?
Well, it would depend where. Okay, yeah, because there are so many different types of tigers. Okay, and they're from very different areas. Like, I brought up the Malayan tiger. Their wild population is very low where they are. And they're so threatened to a point that it's the government stepped in, just like they did with Virunga with the gorillas there. Like it's to that point. You would also have to take into account that the wild population where they exist today might not acknowledge a captive tiger as its friend. It could lead to conflict in the wild as well, where that animal might not be accepted, or it might be alienated to a point where it might get, and that animal was reliant on humans for food. You know what I mean? So that animal might not necessarily, it might know how to hunt, but it might not have the confidence to do it the way that it would if it was born in the wild and taught to hunt. You know what I mean? So it's
I don't think anybody would just throw out these animals go into the wild. I think that there would have to be a plan accordingly.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone would just say, "Oh, okay, there's a thing to, send the tigers out." There would be steps to it. It wouldn't just be, "Oh, we're gonna throw them out to the wild."
Yeah. No, I get that. And like with what Rick O'Barry's doing with the Dolphin Project and their facilities in Bali, how they're actually showing the world that you can rewild dolphins from the captive trade, and you could actually teach them how to be wild again. I get that, but that takes time, that takes money, and it takes people that are dedicated to do that whole process as well. And money doesn't exactly come easy unless you have that funding behind it, and the platform behind it, which is why I started my fundraising business to shed light on the people that are actually out there committed to making this change, and putting a spotlight on them and being like, hey, this is where the money needs to go. Like, these are the people doing the work. These are the people that are actually like showing us that yes, it can be done. Oh my gosh, they have the facilities to teach this animal how to thrive in the wild again.
But that's the thing. There are those facilities, so why don't we use them and stop the breeding in captivity, and then slowly get. It wouldn't happen overnight. It probably wouldn't happen in our lifetime either. I mean, but I think that we got these animals here, so it's our job to figure out how to get them out of it.
Yep. And that's why, Rick O'Barry, the Critchlows, that people are making a huge change in the industry and showing that these things can be done in a good way. Those are the people that I'm behind, so.
And Jeff, you have a special case with this and actually worked to change some laws. regarding this.
Yeah, and I want to back up to what Konrad said, and I saw that comment come across the bottom of the screen about connecting, to make a positive difference, not just for the sustainability of the animals in their native habitats, but for the community, humans. And that a perfect example, and this goes back decades, is the Snow Leopard Trust. Right? They wanted to make a positive difference, help sustain the population of snow leopards in their native habitats. What they realized in investigating the problem solution is that the villagers, the impoverished villagers in those parts of the world, were poaching snow leopards because the snow leopards were killing their livestock. And these impoverished villagers would make, $300-400 a year. So what the Snow Leopard Trust did is work together to find a common solution, right? And that was to help these villagers practice better animal husbandry, to help them use their crafts to sell worldwide, to use those funds. And we at Big Cat Rescue, we were one of the biggest supporters, and those funds go back to those villagers. And then thirdly, the Snow Leopard Trust said to these villagers, listen, if we come back next year and the census of the snow leopards in this region is no less and potentially more, we're going to reward your community with X number of thousands of dollars. So it's a win-win when you teach better husbandry, you remove the incentive for these villagers, these native habitat people in that region for poaching snow leopards. And that's what Big Cat Rescue as an organization, as a GFAS accredited sanctuary, ended up evolving towards. Is we retired the remaining cats we had to Turpentine Creek, another GFAS accredited sanctuary in Arkansas, and Big Cat Rescue stays in business. And what they do as a nonprofit is they're now channeling funds to boots on the ground projects for small cat initiatives all around the world. Right, that's the solution: is supporting boots on the ground projects that are already in existence in the native countries of these species of the wild cats, or any species, and supporting those initiatives. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. And as far as legislative, the Big Cat Public Safety Act, which was, it was probably a 12-year initiative by some of the nation's most respected animal welfare organizations, IFAW, Born Free, HSUS, Big Cat Rescue, and many others, ALDF. And it was signed into law by former President Biden in December in 2022, went into effect in January 2023, and it did two cornerstones. It was to prohibit the private ownership of the greater cats, so lions, tigers, leopards, snow leopards, jaguars, and the cougar mountain lions. And just as importantly, number two is it prohibits public contact with those greater cats, because they were all being bred for one purpose, and that was we call it pay to play. And so that you and your children could go to the state fair or to a nefarious roadside zoo and cuddle and take your picture with any of those cubs. But what's happening is that cycle of cubs, they generally were exploited from birth to 8 or 12 weeks old, and then they disappeared, right? Because they were too dangerous to cuddle with. So that cycle of breeding continues. So the Big Cat Public Safety Act put that industry out of business. Now the next legislative initiative we're hoping we've seen it reintroduced is the Captive Primate Safety Act. And that's going to basically, hopefully, do exactly what the Big Cat Public Safety Act did. Because right now in our country, across the country, now that the big cats are not being exploited to that degree, small primates are exploited. They're owned as private pets. They're exploited at roadside zoos across the country, that they allow you to engage in hands-on encounters. And that's how those nefarious facilities make money. So it's not just a cat thing or an elephant thing. It's a sentient creature thing, right? We need to be that voice, and we do that through effective legislation.
Absolutely amazing, because it's the only way. And it has made the most profound changes. And so I thank you, Jeff, for all of that advocacy and work, because it's really incredible how you guys have moved that needle. Konrad, I see you wanted to hop in. Yep.
Yeah. One thing that I do have to add about major, I don't want to say extreme in a negative way, because a lot of these big bills that are passed, they do make good, significant changes, positive changes for the industry. However, I do have to, Eric, I don't know if you could bring this on the screen. There was a House bill that was introduced in Michigan years ago, House Bill 6455. Now, this was a ban that was introduced to ban all. I'm not sure. It's been a few years since I had to deal with this. I actually had to message the sponsor of the bill, email the sponsor of the bill, and urge him to reconsider this bill, because the issue with the bill was that it was a ban outright of all crocodilians, just everything in general, the ownership, the breeding, everything. But the issue with the bill was that it didn't differentiate between your Joe Schmo keeping the gator chained up in their basement, or, good people like my partners at the sanctuary who are actually providing a public service and helping these animals. And the bill would have actually caused my partners, my colleagues to, go bankrupt if they were trying to, go and, get accredited. And they literally were like, it was hell. It was a nightmarish situation with what the state was, requiring people to do in such a short notice. It was just not right. The way that it was worded in the bill, I just saw that it was just a huge issue, because it was going to really affect the livelihoods of very good, credible facilities that were open, that were doing things the right way. But because the verbiage in this bill, that it did not differentiate between the criminals and the good people who were actually helping out. You know what I mean? So that was the issue.
Interesting. And it did, you said it did not pass.
No.
Do you think that if they were to modify it, that you would support it if it were to go be reintroduced?
If it did acknowledge that, that there were establishments, such as the sanctuary, such as, the conservancy that I mentioned, such as, there are good people, there are good rehabilitators, there are good people that actually work with these animals that, need to be acknowledged before you go and pass a bill like this. Because yes, the bill initially was introduced to stop criminals and stop people that, abuse these animals. Yes, I get it totally. But on the other hand, it's two sides of the same coin. You have to acknowledge both.
Well, not to be the devil's advocate, would you support the private ban of that species for private ownership?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly, and that's what, to get a legislative initiative to be worded correctly, that's why it took at least 12 or more years to get that Big Cat Public Safety Act through Washington, and that's, so I would hope that legislative initiative that didn't pass, hopefully there's a constituents that would work together to refine it, put the correct wording in that lets the good facilities remain, doesn't make anybody euthanize any of the reptilians, it moves the bill forward and starts putting the problem to rest. Yeah, that's
exactly. Yeah, because nobody, honestly, like, if I'm being honest, nobody should own an alligator. There's no reason to privately own an alligator unless you have acres and like huge facilities for it to thrive. It's not.
Well, Repticon is part of the problem. It's been going on for decades, and you see them going around the country every quarter. They go to major cities, and they just are a convention of just every reptile you can imagine in a Tupperware container. And now they've moved up to including small mammals, and they're a disease to animal welfare.
Mm.
I think they just had one down in Florida, and it's odd because Facebook knows that we talk a lot about animals, and it sent it to me as an ad, like, you're gonna love to go to this. And so the whole algorithm, it hasn't fully gone on yet, but it does bring up that, like, back in the day, abusing animals, doing anything to them didn't really matter. It was just how things were. And today we have a really empathetic world that I think is primed to understand and to try to make the changes that are positive. And one thing I heard, even with everyone's different perspectives, is the idea that maybe we can work towards a future where we can provide safe places for animals in the wild and try to move them all from one side of the wall to the other, but it's going to take a lot of work, and we have to work on our world first, because our world has been destroyed.
Kudos to you, Eric. Kudos to you and Sierra for, making this conversation possible. It's just been a privilege and pleasure to work with the both of you the past couple of years, and I hope to be able to work further and look forward to meeting you guys in Tampa. But it is this collective, right? Konrad, Nicole, all of us having a conversation, right? Nothing happens unless we discuss it, and there's nothing better than respectful, ethical conversations that let us move that needle forward for society. So this is how we can all make a positive difference in the lives of these sentient creatures that can't speak for themselves.
Yep, it's like the Avengers assemble. It's
true. I always say, like, we as a group are the encyclopedia. I feel like I learned a lot today just hearing everybody talk about this problem solving, because it's one Rubik's Cube that we all have a hand on. So I want to thank everybody for joining today. It's really been an incredible conversation. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
I really encourage you guys to go check out the videos of the Belle Isle Zoo, the abandoned zoo. But it's heartbreaking.
It's great that that past is a remnant, and again, it's a great thing to know that it's no longer acceptable. So yeah, and I would love to continue and just keep having more series of these conversations, because I also want to hear what everybody that's watching the video now thinks. What can we do to change the world for the better for the animals inside and outside of the walls? We'd love to hear your ideas, because the more ideas we have, the more solutions we can choose from. The solution as of yet, I don't think exists. We're all problem solving it, because it's not quite there, and sanctuaries are a step towards it, but we still have a lot of questions to solve, I think. But yes, thank you everybody again for joining, and if anybody's going to be in Tampa, join us Earth Week. We are doing a special screening of Harambe, and we're going to have Jeff Kremer down there as well, so you can meet Jeff and myself and Sierra, and we're going to have Q&A and have a great talk and a screening. So we'll put that information up as well. So we just keep pushing the topics and keep talking the talkings. Conversation.
Okay.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Sierra.
Take care.
Have a good day.